Justin from the National Hurricane Center, as Tropical Storm Melissa formed shortly before 11 o'clock Eastern this morning. You see the post on your screen there from Phil Klotzbach. Phil saying that this is the first tropical system to form in the Caribbean this season. He's a researcher at Colorado State University. It is a complicated future for Melissa, as there are several scenarios and paths this storm may take over the next few days, which we'll dig into coming up later in the hour. But Phil Klotzbach joins us now. He's that hurricane specialist and senior research scientist. Phil, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And what great timing, right? We just had Tropical Storm Melissa form. You always have a unique stat, and you had mentioned in that post on X that the last time no named storm in the Caribbean was 1997. I guess we don't achieve that this season. But are you surprised we haven't had a named storm in the Caribbean until now?
Yeah, I would think certainly, yeah. I mean, we would have expected more activity in the Caribbean. A couple of reasons. One is that, we have had cool, neutral, and so basically not quite to La Nina, but on the colder side of normal. Most of the season now, NOAA officially declared La Nina present. When you have La Nina, that tends to reduce levels of vertical wind shear, which is that change in wind speed and direction with height in the atmosphere. Too much shear tears apart hurricanes. And in general, the shear has actually been fairly low in the Caribbean for most of the hurricane season. And also right now, the Caribbean is extremely warm. So there is, plenty of fuel for Melissa. So we would have expected to have seen more activity in the Caribbean this year. But unfortunately, Melissa, given its likely kind of slow moving track, is probably going to be, pretty bad storm in that region, just given there's a lot of land masses. There's not a lot of places it can go where it's not going to cause at least a lot of flooding. And obviously, we'll see about wind. It just depends on the exact track, as Brian was talking about a few minutes ago, as to how much time it spends over water, exactly where it goes. Obviously, if it interacts a lot with land, maybe it won't be as strong, but it'll just have even potentially more flooding impacts.
How about the origins of what was previously just an invest? Now we'll just be able to call it Melissa. This thing having that journey through the main development region, we always talk about it too in tropical meteorology. The Cabo Verde season tends to wrap up. Would you consider this season to be a bit anomalous when we look at this late season wave, which emerged off the coast of Africa and now is named Melissa?
So typically early and middle of the season, especially middle of the season, you can get a lot of storms forming right off of Africa from what we call these easterly waves. So these strong thunderstorm complexes. As you get later in the season, those waves will still serve effectively as seeds for tropical storms and hurricanes. They just don't form until they get farther west in the basin. So kind of where Melissa has formed is kind of a classic location for storms forming in October. Typically, and what kind of held this storm back as well, is there's too much vertical wind shear in the eastern and central Atlantic as you get later on in the season. But as you go farther west, the shear is low enough that you can support storms. Certainly the Caribbean this time of year, every year is extremely warm. This year, even warmer than normal. Most of where Melissa is going to track, water temperatures are 85, 86, 87 degrees Fahrenheit. So certainly water temperatures aren't going to be what inhibits this storm. It's going to likely be still some moderate to potentially even a little bit stronger than moderate vertical wind shear over the next several days.
Yeah, and we could hope that the wind shear stays high. It's been fascinating to watch the forecast models, Phil, on this storm, because while you hope for some confidence, high confidence, especially with the name being assigned, there are still some big-time questions. How strong will this subtropical ridge be? Could you speak more broadly about the month of October and what we should look for in the Caribbean? I guess no Octobers can be treated equally, but in regards to Melissa, just hanging out in the Caribbean, most likely not moving much between now and Saturday or Sunday. I mean, if we do, in fact, see this thing stall out, is that odd? Is that uncommon for an October storm?
Typically when you get, basically you have high pressure to the system's northwest and high pressure to the system's basically northeast, and kind of what we call basically like a weakness in the ridge in between. That is often a recipe for a storm to stall out or to move very, very slowly. And, I think certainly the models generally agree the storm will be moving very slowly. Exactly how slowly kind of remains to be seen. It's not that uncommon to have storms move slowly kind of at, any time of year. One of the things that we talk about a lot with storms is, typically storms, when they move very, very slowly, they tend to weaken because they upwell or churn up cold water, because a hurricane, a tropical storm has very strong winds, mixes up cooler water. But in the case of the central and western Caribbean, the water temperatures at the ocean surface are very warm, but also deeper down in the ocean. So when the winds are blowing very strongly, they're just going to be mixing up still very warm water. So, the storm there can still basically move very, very slowly and still produce or still stay quite strong.
That's, I think, what's so unique, because the Caribbean in large part has not been touched this season. It was a much different story just last year, and we saw what the Caribbean was able to do with Beryl. This is no Beryl, but there is an explicit forecast for Tropical Storm Melissa to form into a hurricane. So then we get into the numbers, right? And I don't want to ask too much about the numbers, but this being our 13 named storm, we still have about 40 days to go in the hurricane season. Anything else standing out for you? Do you think our focus will remain in the Caribbean, let's say, over the next couple of weeks until we at least get into the month of November? How do the next 2 weeks shake out, or what are you seeing right now?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously Melissa is going to be the primary focus for a while. Obviously, kind of what happens beyond Melissa still remains to be seen. For the United States, typically when you get into November, the odds of hurricane landfalls dwindle dramatically. Not always the case. We did have a hurricane landfall back in 2022 in November, Hurricane Nicole, but the odds do drop quite a bit. We've only had 4 hurricanes hit the U.S. in November. Obviously, we still need to monitor Melissa for exactly kind of how it's going to track and how long it's going to linger in the Caribbean to kind of see what its final track ends up being. But again, I think there's still just a lot of uncertainty, just given Melissa's still kind of in its formation stages, and how strong it gets, exactly where those high pressures and low pressures set up is going to be really critical in terms of dictating exactly where the storm goes in the next week or so.
Yeah, because if you're looking from a U.S.-based interest, I mean, it's even beyond that 120 hours, which is all that the National Hurricane Center at the moment will forecast out from an intensity standpoint. So we've got plenty of time to watch this thing, and we'll be hoping for the best. Hopefully it just slows, doesn't strengthen into a hurricane, but we'll see. The Caribbean's pretty warm this time of year, and we got to pay attention to it. Phil Klotzbach, Colorado State University hurricane specialist, thanks for joining us on Weather Command.
Thank you.